Welcome to the Proverbs Daily Devotion. Today we're going to investigate in Proverbs the power of the tongue. The tongue can be used for either good or bad, and we're going to actually look at different ways in both areas of the way that the tongue can be used for either good or bad. So let's start out getting right into it. So Proverbs chapter 10 verse 11 says, "The mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence." Springs and fountains were the lifeblood of cities and towns, and quite frankly they still are. But water back then was absolutely essential because they had no real good ways of moving water from over long distances. So they often built cities and towns around the springs and fountains that they had. And so when it says the mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life, these people would know exactly what they're talking about, and that's a good thing. That they would consider the fountain of life of being a very good thing. Also look at this verse and notice that it says the mouth of the righteous and the mouth of the wicked. It's not the mouth of the ignorant. So this is a moral difference. It's a difference between the attitude and the intentions morally, and it's not one of knowledge. It's not the mouth of the ignorant. It's the righteous and the wicked. So in Proverbs chapter 6, verse 16 through 19, it reads this way: "There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, and feet that are quick to rush into evil, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community." So as many as 3 of these things that the Lord detests are about words, or the use of the mouth, the tongue. We can either build up with the tongue or we can tear down. And obviously the Lord wants us to build up and to strengthen people and to encourage them. So let's start out with the bad use of the tongue, and then tomorrow we'll actually get into the good uses of the tongue. But today we're going to focus on the bad ways that we can use our tongue, and we'll just talk about each one and see what we can determine. So Proverbs chapter 20 verse 17 starts out and says, "Food gained by fraud tastes sweet, but one ends up with a mouth full of gravel." In Proverbs 28:23, it says, "Whoever rebukes a person will in the end gain favor, rather than one who has a flattering tongue." So what is flattery? Flattery is compliments or insincere compliments that a person says to gain an advantage for themselves, gain an advantage with this person. Fraud is simply giving untruth to affect or drive a certain outcome. So both of these things are obviously something that the Lord detests. He doesn't. He detests flattery. He detests a flattering tongue and fraud. So both of those would certainly qualify as a bad use of the tongue. Let's go to the second one: gossip and slander. Proverbs chapter 6 verse 12 through 14 says, "A troublemaker and a villain who goes about with a corrupt mouth, who winks maliciously with his eyes, signals with his feet, and motions with his fingers, who plots evil with deceit in his heart. He always stirs up conflict." Proverbs chapter 10 verse 18, "Whoever conceals hatred with lying lips spreads slander as a fool." Proverbs 18 verses 7 and 8. The mouths of fools are their undoing, and their lips are a snare to their very lives. The words of a gossip are like choice morsels, and go down to the innermost parts. So who hasn't really been hurt by gossip? By gossip, I mean the talk that divides and hurts, and typically is exaggerated information spread with malice. When we hear information that could harm someone or talks in a derogatory manner about someone, ask these questions. First, does the information involve you or affect you directly? If it doesn't, then don't spread it any further. Don't repeat it. If it does affect you directly, then maybe speak directly to the person and address the issue that way. So then we also have to consider what the motive was of the person that told the information. If it's not in love, then either potentially rebuke the person that told it or remove yourself from the conversation. And that's probably the easiest way out, is to simply, step out and get away from that conversation. If the motive is misguided, then offer to maybe facilitate a constructive conversation between the person that's telling this information and the actual person that it's about. Obviously, you need to seek guidance from the Lord on how to deal with that kind of situation when you're hearing gossip, and should you invoke those kind of things as to setting up conversations between two people and how that might end up. Let the Lord guide you with that. The Spirit will certainly help you decide what is best. Number 3 are heated arguments and striving and angry words. In your spare time, you could read Proverbs 14, verses 16 and 17, chapter 15, verse 4, chapter 17, verse 14, chapter 18, verse 6, chapter 25, verse 15, and 29, verse 11 sometime. That is just some maybe off time in your leisure time reading, but for the sake of this devotional, we're going to look at Proverbs 22, 24 through 25. And it reads, "Do not make friends with a hot-tempered person. Do not associate with anyone easily angered, or you may learn their ways and get yourself ensnarled." Proverbs 29, verse 22 reads, "An angry person stirs up conflict, and a hot-tempered person commits many sins." By arguments and striving, it does not mean the expressing of differing opinions or even confrontation that is actually constructive. Intelligent thinking and open conversation must allow for everyone to give their ideas. This is actually how we find truth. These verses are talking about negative attitudes and causing division and just causing, stirring up trouble and not being constructive. Number 4, the fourth way that we can use our tongue negatively. Look at Proverbs 25, verse 14. "Like clouds and wind without rain is one who boasts of gifts never given." So we're talking about boasting and self-exalting, by the way. Proverbs 26:12 says, "Do you see a person wise in their own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for them." Proverbs 27, verses 1 and 2 reads, "Do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring. Let someone else praise you, and not your own mouth, an outsider, and not your own lips." So you could see that someone that is boasting about themselves, standing themselves up high and talking about themselves are people that we may not want to be around, quite frankly, but they're not something that the Lord prefers or certainly detests. So, and then the last negative way to use the tongue is with many words or babbling. Proverbs chapter 10 verse 8 says, "The wise in heart accepts commands, but a chattering fool comes to ruin." Proverbs chapter 10 verse 19, "Sin is not ended by multiplying words, but the prudent hold their tongues." And lastly, Proverbs 17 verses 27 and 28, and it reads, "The one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even-tempered. Even fools are thought wise if they keep silent, and discerning if they hold their tongues." So talking much and saying little. We certainly have, I'm most likely come in contact with someone like that talks a lot and talks with a lot of words, but doesn't really say anything that matters, that's constructive, that's positive. So we want to try to keep ourselves away from that kind of situation. So those are the negative ways that we can use our tongue, or at least that's 5 of the ways that we can do that. I'm sure there's others, but we need to make sure that we keep ourselves positive and not using these negative things or negative ways to tear down or destroy and talk derogatory about anybody, whatever. We want to be positive, not negative. So I hope you enjoyed this. Come back for tomorrow and we'll talk about the 5 ways of being positive uses of our tongue. And so we'll look forward to that. See you soon.